Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first live stream for the Upsetting Concrete podcast. I'm your host, Grant March. Today, we're going to be looking at the 3 meetings that happened recently concerning defective concrete blocks in the houses of the Oireachtas. But just before we do that, and just before I get my guests to introduce themselves, just a brief outline of what the idea of this live stream. So the goal would be to be able to do it once a week, if possible. But maybe the next one we'll do in a month's time. For starters, we'll just take it easy, getting going, and then we'll try and up the frequency after that. The idea would be to discuss specific issues related to defective concrete. So, I mean, it could be anything from, getting a mobile home. Where do you get one from? How much do they cost? How do you transport it? What do you do when you don't need it anymore? People can ask questions and stuff. Today we have kind of a packed meeting, so we're not going to be really. We won't have any time for questions in today's meeting. But hopefully we can get experts from the concrete experts. We can get TDs. Hopefully, we'll have to see how it goes, and fingers crossed, it could be something very useful for the defective homeowner community. Just before we start, I just want to say that the aim of the stream would be to have responsible communication. So I'm hoping that all of us, anyone who participates on the stream, will be clear about when they're talking about their own opinions and when they're talking about things that are actual facts. So we need to kind of distinguish between those. And we should be respectful in our statements to anybody that we're talking about or talking with. And we should also try and correct our comments on air. So with that, I'm going to ask my two guests. We have Sarah. Sarah. I've forgotten your surname, Sarah.
Sarah Shovlin, yeah.
Oh my God, Sarah Shovlin, excuse me. And Sean McCabe. Sarah, would you mind just giving us an introduction to yourself, just a brief introduction?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Sarah Shovlin. I'm living in Nishowen and have recently demolished my defective block home. And I have volunteered on the Banking and Insurance focus group since February 2023.
Great. And Sean?
Yeah, Sean McCabe. Yes, same as Sarah. I'm a volunteer member of the Banking and Insurance focus group. The group was started under the initiative of Roisin Gallagher, the redress focus groups last year in February 2023. And I was asked into the group in March 2023. And similar to Sarah, I'm also a defective block homeowner living in Nishowen. So this particular crisis is very relevant to me as it is to Sarah. So.
And just a quick question: Sean, you have a background in finance, and could you just say a word about that?
Yeah, well, I have a small business that operates in the north. And I work as a broker, a mortgage broker. So I have some experience of financial services for the last 15, 16 years. And that's been useful with, trying to help the group from the background that I come from and dealing with the banks, etc. So that has been a useful part of my background to use in terms of the whole crisis.
Great. And Sarah, do you have a background in finance, or are you coming at it from a different angle?
I don't. Yeah, I'm just an affected homeowner trying to work my way through the scheme, which has proved extremely difficult. And I just wanted to be there to try and find an easier way for those coming behind.
Great. Okay. So tonight I've tried to prepare a summary or my summary of the 3 meetings. I was hoping it was only going to be 10 minutes long, but it's after turning out to be 24 minutes long. So we're going to play that video first, and then we're going to discuss the meeting afterwards. Just to say that these clips are taken at different places, maybe different videos at different times. So it's not in chronological order, but it's like a what do you call it, like a scrapbook of videos. Um, and we'll probably be going over an hour tonight. We're probably going to usually, well, hopefully the video is a bit longer than it hopefully would normally be, 24 minutes. So we'll talk for about an hour after that, so we'll be finishing it partly. Okay, so I'll play the background video. Of clips from the 2 Finance Committee meetings and the 1 Housing Committee meeting that took place over the last 2 weeks. Clips from other videos have also been used. The clips are not in chronological order. Mr. Brian Hayes of the Banking and Payments Federation of Ireland spoke of mortgageability in his opening statement to the Finance Committee.
AIB, EBS and Haven, Bank of Ireland and PTSB have a willingness to lend based on the certification and professional opinion provided by others in the conveyancing process, as per the standard process by which mortgages are approved. This position is confirmed in respect of all remediating options 1 to 5 under the grant scheme. It also applies to the future sale of remediated properties, to the switching of mortgages attached to remediated properties and to future top-ups. Considering a recent statement by the MICA Action Group and the publication of a research update regarding the review of IS 465, BPFI and our members await a formal response from the Department of Housing in relation to the aspect of the scheme. We note the contents of the update and the concerns raised in relation to the impact of defective materials on the foundations in retained blockwork. Concerns have existed for some time regarding the review of IS 465. May we respectfully suggest to the committee that the work of the National Standards Authority of Ireland in this matter is now critical.
This is an excerpt from the letter that the MICA Action Group received through their Freedom of Information request. Anyone following the defective concrete crisis will know at this stage that pyrrhotite is known for being an iron sulfide mineral that is more aggressive than pyrite in deteriorating concrete. In fact, the report of the expert panel on concrete blocks from June 2017, which is the basis on which IS 465 is based, even mentions that pyrrhotite is much more reactive than pyrite. Another important consideration of this 2017 report is the disclaimer, which says that the expert panel did not carry out any tests and they have no responsibility for the accuracy of the technical reports and the information it received, and the report should be read in that light. We should also note that this report was used to create the IS 465 standard, which is the basis for a scheme that is expected to cost over 2.2 billion euros. And here we see that the conclusion that mica is the problem in Donegal is based on an opinion, not on science. At this point, we should mention the Irish Concrete Federation. The Irish Concrete Federation is the national representative organisation for the Irish aggregates and concrete products industry. In the organisation's 2017 annual report, we see this quote: "Towards the latter part of the year, members of the ICF's technical committee were appointed to the NSAI's expert committee to implement the recommendations of the report on concrete blocks, which was produced in June. ICF welcomed the recommendations of the expert panel on concrete blocks and looks forward to positively contributing to the work of the expert panel throughout 2018, unquote. So at the same time that the 2017 report of the expert panel on concrete blocks was being drafted, and which forms the basis for IS 465, some members of the ICF's technical committee were advising the NSAI, and an employee from Cassidy Brothers was a member of the Irish Concrete Federation's technical committee, some of whose members helped form IS 465. In fact, Cassidy Brothers was on the Irish Concrete Federation's technical committee from 2014 until 2019, 2 years after the report of the expert panel on concrete blocks was published in 2017. But getting back to Mr. Hayes, on the 1st of May 2024, he mentioned the BPFI's interim funding proposal.
During the engagement with our friends from the Redress Focus Group, a potential challenge was identified with funding the commencement of remediation works prior to the receipt of the first grant payment. Last September, BPFI and our members submitted a proposal for an interim funding mechanism to the Department of Housing for its consideration.
Here's a reminder of Mr. Hayes describing that proposal 8 months ago.
And our suggestion to the department broadly is the three banks have put this proposal through BPFI. We can provide maybe 10 to 15% of the overall grant up front, because the current legislation doesn't allow for that grant money to be paid up front, on the basis that we will get the money back once the initial tranche is made from the Housing Authority.
Mr. Hayes explained that this interim funding would be accessible to any homeowner and would not be subject to regulations regarding a borrower's creditworthiness, which would apply to a zero-interest loan. But Mr. Derek Rafferty from the Department of Housing said that the BPFI proposal was not practical.
We further engaged again with BPFI on this, and digging into the detail of their proposal, it wasn't quite as straightforward as the bank are just going to provide the loan up front. They wanted the local authorities to administer the scheme. They wanted an IT system set up that would facilitate bespoke for this. There was a lot of detailed contractual stuff they wanted to be done in the background.
Back to Mr. Hayes. He spoke of a surprising proposal put forward by the Department of Housing a week previous to the 1st of May.
Last week, we were informed by the Department of Housing that it is working to finalise the details of a process that would allow for earlier access to funds approved under the grant scheme. We very much welcome the department's work to permit earlier access to funds, which is a more effective solution for impacted homeowners.
But Mr. Rafferty clarified what the department was proposing as follows.
When we did set up our implementations group in January, and our first meeting of that group, it became clear that, well, at that meeting, that homeowners were telling us, and specifically at that meeting in January, they stated that what they needed this money for was for professional fees, first and foremost, not for paying contractors. That's what they told us in January.
It seems strange that Mr. Rafferty was not aware of the necessity of homeowners to use some upfront money to retain contractors. Did the homeowners really say that they were only looking for professional fees?
I'm sure you're familiar with many examples of different ranges, but where people have to find tens of thousands of euro. It's common, would it not be?
I've had people say that to me. I don't have any data, nor does the housing agency or the local authorities, about what actually has been the outcome. So we don't have any actual firm data about what gap, if any, there is between what's available under grants and what it actually costs. We don't have that. But no more than yourself, I have heard people, homeowners, who've said to me that it is likely to cost them more. Yes.
Okay.
But I mean, I don't have any data to back that up.
Why is there no such data, considering the scheme was formally published in November 2022? Mr. Hayes spoke about the low numbers of homeowners who are coming forward to the banks.
It should be noted at this point, however, that to date, the volume of customers coming forward to our members remains quite low, with just over 370 who have made contact with the 3 retail banks.
He said that the banks were providing trained frontline staff.
Specific provisions are in place to ensure impacted homeowners are supported in line with their individual needs. Ensuring frontline staff are fully and sensitively trained to work with impacted homeowners, which has included the training of frontline staff by vulnerable customer experts.
But are the banks geared up for the conservative number of just under 6,000 potentially affected homes in Donegal and Mayo from the 2021 report on the Defective Concrete Blocks Grant Scheme? In fact, Donegal County Councillor Martin McDermott, who is the chair of the Defective Concrete Steering Committee for the county, spoke of many more homes being affected in this interview from February 2022.
Do you have any friends or family that are affected by defective concrete blocks?
Yeah, all my friends and family and myself. Where I live, everybody's affected. There's hundreds of houses around me, so all friends, family, neighbours, the whole of Inishowen in particular. We have probably somewhere in the region of 10,000 homes affected. So everywhere you go, everywhere you turn, there's affected homes, so you can't get away from that.
Ms. Moya Murdoch, the CEO of Insurance Ireland, said that home insurance had never included defective materials.
When it comes to the provision of insurance, it is important to note household insurance policies cover damage that is caused by insured perils such as fire, storm, flood and theft. Defective materials such as the defective concrete blocks are not and have not been an insured peril. Furthermore, household insurance policies exclude claims arising from faulty workmanship, defective design and the use of defective materials.
This old press release from the Insurance Ireland website from December 2012 said that insurers were going to likely pay out in excess of €100 million for pyrite damage. When the perils like defective materials or professional negligence are completely outside the control of the homeowner, am I wrong in thinking that it would be logical that faulty workmanship, defective design, and the use of defective materials ought to be included in homeowner policies? Especially now that currently professionals have to rely on each other's certificates, despite the fact that NSAI is reviewing IS 465.
Under this scheme, a homeowner must obtain a certificate of remediation signed by the contractor and the competent building professional in order to secure the final grant payment. This certificate of remediation essentially acts as proof that the house has been repaired under the Enhanced Defective Block scheme.
Damien Owens, the Director General of Engineers Ireland, spoke of the difficulties his profession has with the scheme.
Engineers who are members of Engineers Ireland's IS 465 register, having completed remediation works in line with the determination of the housing agency, will be able to provide a certificate of remediation as described. So when a remediated property is sold at a later date, a prospective purchaser is normally advised to have a pre-purchase survey carried out at that time. If the property has concrete blocks containing excessive amounts of deleterious materials, they may be unlikely to exhibit the durability or robustness of a block without excessive amounts of these materials, and therefore future performance of these blocks is unpredictable. This leads to uncertainty for both the relevant professional attempting to complete a survey as well as a homeowner or prospective purchaser commissioning a survey. And this is a challenge for all professionals working in this area.
All professionals that have a role in the construction industry, be they engineers, architects, construction companies, insurers, banks, legal personnel, cannot currently rely on certificates produced according to the IS 465 standard.
IS 465 is now under much needed review by the NSCI. While it's important that the outcome of this review should not be preempted in this response, it is nevertheless the view of many engineers that the existing standard is no longer fit for purpose, and developments in scientific understanding of this issue must be appropriately considered. Engineers Ireland is calling on the government to divert all necessary resources to NSCI to ensure that a revision is completed by the end of this year.
Later, we will hear why IS 465 will not be completed by the end of this year. Mr. Owens had this to say about housing agency engineers overturning homeowner engineers' decisions.
A survey conducted in March 2024 of the members of Engineers Ireland's register has shown that 75% of the engineers employed by homeowners have experienced having a revised option by a framework engineer employed by the housing agency with respect to the same property.
Bob Jordan, the chief executive from the housing agency, said this.
I think it's important to say that 4 out of every 5 remediation option determinations from the housing agency are either the same as the homeowners engineers or even higher in some cases.
Mr. Owens explained the precautions engineers should be taking in light of the uncertainty over the review of IS 465 that is currently taking place.
It's admitted that given the research on review of ISIX 465 has not been completed, that where discrepancy exists between the recommendation of a member of the Register and the Housing Agency that a higher option of 2 should be preferred to provide greater assurance to homeowners and building professionals.
So a conservative approach would be option 1, which is demolition and rebuild. If it was your, can I ask you, if it was your house, under at the minute, you can't, demolition is demolition down to the foundations, and you leave the foundations in. As an engineer, and as a senior engineer in this country, if it was your house and you were approved for option 1, demolition, would you leave the foundations in, wearing your engineer's hat? Would you build on the foundations?
I would look, in terms of if it's my own property, I would look at the extent of damage to the property, and in terms of the foundations, take samples and base a decision on that.
A different engineer with a degree from Galway University and 13 years experience in construction and engineering in the USA, in an interview with Greg Hughes on the 9 till Noon show on Highland Radio, gave a different response to this question in July 2023.
There is that issue of foundations that's not answered yet, but what I suggest, it's only a personal suggestion, if you're replacing the entire house, it makes a lot of sense to replace the foundation, even though people find it hard to find the money for that, but almost impossible to replace the foundation later on a new house that's built.
Yeah.
So it's, and I understand there's a lot of debate on that, and that'll come, but it's quite slow.
Yeah.
But I think the sensible thing would be, well, cut back on someone else that may be easier to replace if you can't afford it, and do the foundations until that's answered. And then so it's I think it's really back to people's individual circumstances. There's nothing wrong, I think, with applying if you're in a position to apply and you understand the facts. The housing age is committed to fixing the worst first, so that would imply, more than likely imply, the worst it will be fixed obviously first, and quite possibly a lot of those would be demolitions.
But for homeowners who have the worst houses, who find it hard or impossible to find the money for foundations, their homes will be left unfixed. Mr. Derek Rafferty from the Department of Housing defined the scope of the Enhanced Block Scheme like this.
The grant amount covers 100% of the work required to remediate a home, up to a maximum grant amount of 420,000, depending on the work required.
I don't know how much more evidence we can supply you with to prove that this grant is not 100% or anywhere near 100%.
I just think to clarify, I should clarify, is that it does cover 100% of the work, eligible work, to remediate the home, but it is based on grant rates that are the grant rates given to us by an expert group on the basis of SCSI rates for rebuild. So 100% of the work is covered, as in the work, 100% of the work of the rebuild is covered, but the rate at which is payable is a different thing, and that may end up being a different amount.
But that's just completely splitting hairs.
But I will say it again, I stand over what's written there, which is that the grant amount does cover 100% of the work required to remediate a home, and the next bit is up to a maximum grant amount of 420,000. Okay, now it's then subject to the rates that are applicable for the payment of the grant. And those rates are set on the basis of an expert report from an expert group led by Paul Ford and informed by SCSI. So,
but do you not accept that that's a provocative statement? I mean, well,
I wouldn't say it's provocative.
No, I tell you why I think it's provocative. No. I'll tell you why I think it's provocative, okay? Because you're an intelligent man. I'd say a very intelligent man, okay? Why do you think 1,300 people turned up at a public meeting recently in the Inishowen Gateway Hotel in my hometown, Buncrana, County Donegal? Why do you think 500 people turned out to a meeting in Mayo? Like, if they were getting what you say is 100% redress, even close to it, do you think those types of numbers would be motivated to come out to public meetings?
I'm not saying they're getting 100% redress. I'm just saying, clearly stating what the scheme does. It does cover 100% of the work up to. I'm not saying, and I've just said that the rates interact with this and may end up with a lower amount. We don't have any visibility on actual, and I accept what the chair said earlier as well about possible examples, and I've been given anecdotal examples myself when I've spoken to homeowners.
In fairness, you say This is not a compensation or redress scheme. So you do say that in the next paragraph of what you say. So I just can't understand when you say that in the following paragraph, why you need to use the word 100%. It's just not factual. It's not based on any evidence whatsoever.
We're not saying it's 100%, that doesn't say that. However, what I will say, I'll certainly reflect on what you've said there and the strength of feeling that you've got across.
The SCSI came up with rates that had to conform to the terms of reference they've been issued with by the Department of Housing. Here, the Chief Executive, Shirley Coulter of the SCSI, explains.
The terms of reference were agreed with the Department on the 7th of February 22, which set out the parameters within which the SCSI would produce an independent, standalone construction cost report for the demolition and rebuild of homes affected by defective concrete blocks. The SCSI had and has no role in the setting the parameters of the grant scheme, for example, which building regs apply, exclusion of foundations, and no role in the setting of the grant amount. While the parameters of the scheme are outside of the scope of the SCSI's cost report for the defective concrete block scheme, it remains the position of the SCSI that best practice is to build to current regulations or indeed to exceed current regulations.
Mr. Rafferty explained that the scheme is not a compensation or redress scheme.
The DCB grant scheme is not a compensation or redress scheme. Rather, it's a grant scheme of last resort put in place by government in order to voluntarily assist homeowners in a very difficult position with no other apparent options open to them to remediate actual damage to their homes. Part of the group's remit was to produce a 6-month report. The Minister recently received this report on the operation of the scheme, covering the period July to December 2023, the first 6 months of the scheme, and is satisfied with the progress being made.
Paul McAuliffe, Fianna Fáil TD for Dublin North West, asked how many properties have been remediated to date.
Mr. Jordan talked about a number of properties that had been remediated to date. Was that a figure of 2,000?
Was that you, Kevin?
No. So the question is, how many properties have been remediated to date?
Fully completed.
I asked Mr. Jordan, yeah.
The remediation option determinations have been issued so far.
The Housing Agency deputies issued 195 remediation option determinations under the enhanced scheme.
Chair, I understand the figures of full completion is around 43 in Donegal and 18 in Mayo, but those figures have started to move up quite significantly, and we'd expect that there'll be at least 50 completed in Mayo before the end of this year, and a corresponding increase in the Donegal numbers as well.
We have probably somewhere in the region of 10,000 homes affected, so everywhere you go, everywhere you turn, there's affected homes, so you can't get away from that.
Mr. Rafferty mentioned the timeline for the ongoing research.
It should be noted that a wider, substantial programme of research and analysis is ongoing, and adequate time is required by the committee members to facilitate careful consideration of all relevant technical input. The GSI research partners have further tasks to complete, and final outputs and conclusions from this research, which are expected in Q4 2024 and Q1 2025, are critical to support the full revision of the standard.
The CEO of the NSAI explained that once the research is concluded, an extra 6 months is required to implement it.
Research projects relating to IS 465 are expected to be concluded in Q4 2024, Q1 2025. The process to complete a standards development requires approximately 6 months following the conclusion of the consideration of any relevant research data.
Ms. Aileen Gleeson from the Department of Finance spoke about consumer protection.
On a general level, the Minister for Finance is of the opinion that the existing financial services consumer protection framework is strong and should be fully applied to assist households impacted by defective blocks. This regulatory framework seeks to ensure that mortgage creditors are transparent and fair in all their dealings with borrowers, and that borrowers are protected from the beginning to the end of the mortgage life cycle.
The Department of Finance does not know what the projected spend of the defective concrete block scheme will be. Mr. Michael McGarvey, Director of Services at Donegal County Council, said that some homeowners are exercising, quote, a lifestyle choice, unquote, to delay entering the scheme.
Thank you, Carla. And I'll just maybe comment on that. It's something I suppose that I've learned myself in Donegal for my time. People are looking for peace of mind in some cases. So once they've been approved for an option, if their homes are not at risk, Some people are happy to wait until at a stage it could be a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years before they're in a position, maybe kids going to college, etc., where they're even relocation.
So the financial burden on their own family and the upfront nature of it is a factor in delayed applications. Would that be fair?
No, I would actually turn it around. It's actually maybe a lifestyle choice in some places. As you know, Deputy and Caherla, that there's some homes there in pressing need of remediation, but there's some homes not. And once people have the peace of mind, they're making a lifestyle choice in some cases.
Yeah, Mr. McGarvey, I'm uncomfortable with the phrase lifestyle choice. You might use a different phrase because I don't think it accurately reflects the position that the people are in.
Okay, sorry.
To close, here is Senator Victor Boyhan expressing frustration with the expert witnesses that attended these meetings.
I have to say, I wouldn't like to be in Donegal today, or Clare, or anywhere else, and listening in here. You are a group of experts that were invited in here today, knowing what you were coming in to do, knowing what you were coming in to say, knowing that they were policy makers here, and they were inevitably going to ask you questions. And it's very despondent. If it was another forum, another classroom, I'd effectively ask you all to leave. Go away, do your work, and come back here in 2 weeks. That's my gut feeling, and I say that being respectful as much as I can. I had a text from a man in Donegal a few minutes ago and said, what the hell is going on?
And just a quick note, this collection of video clips is curated from publicly available sources. It has taken me hundreds of hours to research, to download, to transcribe, to search through, to archive, to memorize, and to edit together over the last 3 years. Currently, all my work has been voluntary. If you are a journalist, researcher, campaigner, or activist that watches my work to inform your own, paid or not, please credit Backstory.ie. Thank you. Sorry, my mic was muted. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
So just before we kick off talking about the meeting, I was wondering if you guys could give us just a little bit of the background story about, like, how did you get the banks and the Banking Payments Federation of Ireland to sit down at a table with you guys? How did that work? Do you want to kick off, Sean? Or Sarah, go ahead.
I was just going to say it didn't happen overnight, Grant. It took a lot of research from some of the members within our group who tirelessly went through their terms and conditions of their mortgage, and it turns out that almost all mortgages have clauses within them that are directly tying the banks to the homeowner and therefore to the defective block scheme. So what I'm talking about there is especially anyone who is approved for demolish. One of the terms and conditions on your mortgage is that if you demolish your house, the bank can call in their mortgage. So you have to actually get your bank's approval. If you have a mortgage on a house and you're about to start demolishing, you need to get their approval. And that was one of the things that we felt finally made the BPFI and its members turn a circle and come and meet us at a table. Because the initial requests that we had for going out to meet those people were that their response was they didn't see it was necessary, that the defective block scheme had nothing to do with them. And we got that from almost everybody that we wrote to at the very start. That was the BPFI, as I've said, the main lenders, and even the central bank, as well as Insurance Ireland, who were very late to come to the table in discussions with us. So if you have something to add there, Sean.
Yeah, the clause or the covenant is in every contract, every mortgage contract, their terms and conditions, and I would urge the public to read that. And it's put in very simple layman's terms. It's to keep your home in good and substantial repair. So it's very important that people understand that, and that's still central to the whole mortgageability issue that we're dealing with. So if your home isn't fit for purpose, then essentially you're in breach of contract. So that was one of the references that we used to engage with the banks, and we wanted assurances around that. And, you know, that's a very important factor. We engaged with them, we wrote to them tirelessly, as Sarah alluded to, And, you know, the BPFI, which is the representative organisation of the banks, facilitated a meeting. And once we got speaking to them, you know, the banks obviously have a duty of care to homeowners. And, you know, there are homes, crucially, there are homes, but they're also their assets. So they have a duty of care to help us, and particularly to help vulnerable people, vulnerable members of the community. And, you know, it's only right that they do that. It's only right that they do that. And we express that concern to them. You need to help us. You need to engage with us. And they have done that. They have engaged with us. Now there's more to do, as we know. Your collage there has picked up on some very key fundamental issues, which I'm sure we'll discuss, but there's lots more to do. There's lots more to do. And can I just point out, Grant, we're here talking about, you know, very specific issues, and our group, as you're aware, is primarily focused around the banking and insurance aspect. But we're here as a result of the failure of the scheme, and we need to keep that in mind. We'll be quite focused today in our conversation around specifics of the scheme, but we're discussing them because of the failure of the scheme and the systemic failure on regulation, on market surveillance, and the government protecting their citizens. So I know we're probably going to get into quite a lot of detail, but I want us all to be aware of why we're here. We shouldn't really be here. And as a group, we set up as a group, I suppose reluctantly, because we felt we had to do something as homeowners, and we're all directly affected. Our families are affected, our communities are affected. And, you know, this is where we are today. And, you know, you can see from your collage and your detailed work there, the huge problems that we're facing, huge problems. So that's where we are today.
Could you tell me, like, how did you contact the banks? Were you writing like paper snail mail letters to the banks and to the BPFI, or just to the BPFI, or were you doing it through emails, or both? Or I'm just wondering what approach you took, because it might help other homeowners who might be taking, you know, trying to do some activism on their own, not with banks per se, but in another avenue, and maybe you would have some advice in that department.
Well, we first we met with all the TDs, we met with councillors, we lobbied them, we wrote to our local representatives and urged them to contact the banks. We wrote directly to the banks. We wrote directly to the BPFI. We used every form of communication possible. Sarah will back that up. And any contact that we had. We have no affiliation to any body or political party, so we met with everybody, anybody that was happy to meet with us and help us. We used it. So we were very grateful that we were able to, you know, get speaking to them. I know other people have tried in the past, but yeah, we used every avenue possible, Grant.
And was it the case that this default clause, what's it called again?
You want to take that one, Sarah?
Yeah, the damage threshold, I think you're referring to there, Grant, and the demolition clause. Yeah.
The clause, wasn't it this you know, specification in the mortgage contract? That was called the.
I do believe that was the turning point. I mean, I personally, in my own circumstances, have been writing to my bank for 3 years and told them my house had defective blocks. I then told them that I had been approved for demolish, and I asked them for help several times, several emails, and I was always just dismissed, you know, with a fill in the standard financial statement if you're having difficulty paying your mortgage. I have paid my mortgage all throughout this. I wasn't having financial difficulty paying the mortgage. I was wanting them to help me reinstate their asset. So as an individual, I got nowhere over 3 years, and having joined the group here, there are, I think, 6 or 7 of us in the group, and collectively, I think it was, the snail mail letters were the first ones. Eventually you get a response, and there might have been a Zoom meeting. After that, a face-to-face meeting, and you get the direct access then to the people that you need. And I think with the examples that we brought to the table at the very start, so myself and another lady on the committee here, we brought our real life situation. Like, I have a house and I need the bank's approval to demolish it. Number one. Number two, the bank now owns nothing and I own nothing because it has been demolished. What are you going to do to help me reinstate that? And, I think there was an awakening point for many of the main lenders in Ireland to actually sit down and think about what, even if it is only 2,000 houses, what does this mean for them? And we know that the number is much, much larger. You've got Councillor McDermott on record there saying, Inishowen could be 10,000. And I think the banks really just need to understand that it is a much larger number than they have maybe thought of. And people are not very good at going to their bank because there's always a certain fear about it's your house and it's your mortgage. And, let's say nothing and just keep going. But the banks need to be, and hopefully now are very aware that it is a huge issue. And they are part of the issue and should therefore be part of the solution. They own the asset, which is my home.
What would you say about the low numbers that Mr. Brian Hayes was talking about? The low numbers have come forward to the banks. I mean, I'm aware of having spoken to some homeowners who've told me that if they went on the scheme, with all the shenanigans going on and the NSAI review and people building houses on foundations that may have to be taken out at a later date, or you've got Engineers Island, Mr. Damien Owens, talking about the complete uncertainty for all professionals, not just his own professionals. And some homeowners that I spoke to, that they want to be involved in that, and that even if they went on the scheme, they don't have the money. But then on the other hand, I suppose from the bank's point of view, are they taking it seriously at this stage? If there's only, was it 370, was that the figure Mr. Hayes used? 370 homeowners have approached the banks. What are your guys' comments on that? And would you have any advice for homeowners on that, in that regard?
My opinion on the low numbers engaging, I think it's symptomatic of the scheme. I think it shows there's a lack of confidence in the scheme, and it shows that the scheme to date is a failure. And I can totally understand why people don't engage with their banks and indeed insurance companies, because they're fearful that if they engage with them, there's horror stories going around, or there's very evident horror stories of people's mortgages being sold off to vulture funds, etc. So I think that the banking industry needs to allay those fears and needs to assure people that if they do come forward, that there would be no repercussions. And so it's quite understandable for people that have no dealings with the banking industry and the insurance industry on a daily basis, that to come forward. It's quite understandable that they wouldn't come forward. So we need assurances from the banks around that. But I think the low numbers, the 370 that the BPFI are referring to, really highlights where we're at in regards to the scheme and the inaccessibility of the scheme, and the lack of confidence in it. So that's why these key issues need to be addressed. And looking at your collage there, really the four key issues that I would point out would be IS 465, the urgency for it to be reviewed, and indeed an interim update on it from the NSAI and the government. And all resources should be pointed towards getting that issue sorted. The other fundamental issues are still there. Interim finance. People aren't engaging, getting back to your original question, people aren't engaging with the scheme because they know that there will be a shortfall. We know that. Sarah and Donna from the group highlighted that in the Oireachtas. We've highlighted that on numerous occasions, even at the last meeting there of the subcommittee on defective block, the steering subcommittee on the 26th of April, we highlighted examples again of that. So people realise that there's a shortfall and that they don't have the money for it. So that explains the numbers. Also, third key point is the mortgageability issue. These are all fun.
Do you mind, Johnny? Sorry, just so I'll just note mortgageability there. But do you mind if I just go back a step? The fear that if you told the bank that you had concrete blocks, that the bank would then just shove your home into a vulture fund, sell it off for, get you off their books. Is that a fear that a homeowner should be genuinely worried about, do you think? Or is that, or you couldn't comment, or?
Well, verbally, the banks have mentioned that they've given assurances verbally that won't be the case. But, why don't they come forward? Why don't they come out on the press and say that? Why don't they come out on Highland Radio and allay those fears? So people are very skeptical of the whole situation. So I understand why people don't come forward. So maybe the banking industry, the BPFI, and I think that that's something that they may look to do in the future, allay people's fears, but more importantly, we're back to the earlier issue, Grant. If the scheme was fit for purpose, and really what we're talking about fit for purpose is an end-to-end scheme. That is the problem. So people know that there's so many issues, and particularly vulnerable people, people in their latter years. Friends that I have, and they're saying they don't want to engage with the scheme. There's too much bureaucracy in it. They know that there's a shortfall. There's too many issues. If I get part of the house fixed and leave other delete risk materials, I mightn't get full market value if I sell it, etc. There's so many issues. There's so many feelings. So, I don't know how real that possibility could be, but certainly people have fears and concerns. So, let's try and allay those fears, and let's try and give people some confidence around that, and that's a matter really for the banks to address, not for us.
A verbal, the bank should come out and put it in writing. It's not fair to just do it in a verbal manner, in my humble opinion. But
I agree.
I think, Grant, it was one of the first things we asked the bank last February, March, April time when we met the BPFI, that we feel that especially the local branches, where we know there's a high concentration of affected houses, the local branches should have posters up that say, if you're affected by defective blocks, come and speak to us. We have, policies and procedures there to help you. And they haven't done that yet. And from my perspective, that's a very simple ask and something that should be done.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, Sean, did you want to add?
Yeah, that's really a question there that you're putting to us is really for the banks. But to be fair to the BPFI, they've seen, they have seen the seriousness of this, and they have made efforts, and along with our negotiations from last year, that they've put a proposal on the table to the government, which I believe there's no official response, but my understanding is that it's not going anywhere. So they did see that there was a huge necessity here, but there's a lot more work to be done, and there's so many issues that we need to address. But that's a question, Grant, that I think should be put directly to the banks rather than for us.
For sure. Going back to the, you guys impressed on Mr. Hayes. Was he in no doubt that the reason money was required up front was to pay contractors? Would he have been aware of that?
The need for working capital was made very aware from the start, and it was made crystal clear right from onset that we needed working capital not just for professional fees, but for also, you know, ordering your windows and doors, or if you're, like we used the timber frame example there at the last meeting, and Donna and Sarah give very detailed examples that we sent to the BPFI early on, and we discussed it at the Oireachtas. So that's, yeah, they're very clear on that. They know that we need working revolving capital. And, you know, to give you an example, if you're setting up a timber frame project, you know, the upfront fees, as they call it, could be as high as 40%, 30% to get the product manufactured, 10% then on substructure drawings. And I have a working example for that, and we've already given them. I'm happy to give them more, but we've made it clear, like, you know, Sarah can maybe give a wee bit more on that, but I think we've left it in no doubt. We certainly didn't ask for just professional fees, as was alluded to in one of the conversation. There was a misunderstanding, they said, and I think they acknowledged that, but we certainly did not ask for professional fees alone, because that does not suffice to get going. You need money up front. People need to be paid. Tradesmen have to make a living. Contractors have to make a living, the same as everybody else. So we made it very clear, Grant, and I think Sarah can maybe add a wee bit more to that.
Yeah, I think you've covered it there, Sean, but my famous statement is always, you can't build a house, or demolish one for that matter, with a €5 in your back pocket. You need money up front, and Sean has a great example there, the timber frame. There are other things that you have to pay for up front. You know, you order your kitchen, that's oftentimes 50% up front. Your stairs are the same. So giving somebody 10 or 20,000 at the start isn't going to cut it. It needs to be revolving capital. Otherwise, you've left the person in a more disadvantaged state than when they started.
Yeah, and you know, you have your fees in, your preliminary fees, your professional fees on top of it. But a working example of that, Grant, would be, say your timber frame kit is 60,000. Okay, so if they want 30%, that is 18 grand, and then another 10% for drawings. That's a working example I have, and I've actually asked the company that's provided that, can I use that with the government? And he says, absolutely, Sean, we're doing this every day of the week. We, you know, that's standard. It's upfront costs. They're producing it in a factory in this particular case, and you know, they have to cover their costs and pay their people. So, you know, I just want to be crystal clear on that. Like, in no way do we ever suggest professional fees alone. We need revolving capital. The BPFA understood that very well as bankers, and in fact, their proposal to the government, you know, was built around that. So I'd also like to point out that that has been referenced in the minutes by the Department of Housing. I don't want to go into too much detail on the specifics of it, but that has been referenced in the minutes. So they're aware that we asked for working capital, and I believe our fellow volunteers in Mayo also made it very clear that they wanted working capital. So all the homeowners are united on that, Grant. There's been a bit of miscommunication there, to say the least. So, but that has been clarified, and I think it's been acknowledged. And at the joint committee there, from some of your snippets, and if you watch it back, you'll see that you know, that there was an acknowledgement that there was a misinterpretation there. So hopefully we can move forward on that and get a suitable remedy to that situation.
It just seems remarkable to me that you know, the housing department would be at the coalface of this crisis, and it just seems like nobody's sat down with a piece of paper and a pen and try to work out, you know, how does a timber frame house work? Like
the reason we've seen for that, Grant, is whenever we first asked the BPFI to step in and help with this, they came up with a plan that was very much how things would work in Dublin, if you like. So a turnkey builder comes in, you probably don't need that much rolling cash, you know, because that guy is charging you 20% extra because he knows he's not going to get paid to the end of it, or he'll get paid at certain stages. But that is typically not how a house is built in Donegal. Number one, there are very few turnkey builders in the county. Number two, the grant doesn't give you the luxury of paying 20% above because you're going to not finish the house or struggle very much to finish the house for the value of the grant. So all of those things play into why, 20,000 up front and take it back in 3 months' time is not going to work. And in fairness to the BPFI, they went back and they did take the feedback on board, and they redesigned something else that we heard there from Brian Hayes that he submitted back in September and is on the Department of Finance's desk. And that's atrocious at this stage. This is people's lives,
Yeah, that needs to be dealt. That needs to be addressed. But no, as you say, Grant, it is a shock that there isn't a full understanding of it. But we've given countless examples, including there at the last meeting. Another homeowner went over a detailed example. So there has to be a willingness on the part of the key stakeholders to do that. And I think that the BPFI have played a big part in trying to push that and have the proposal, thanks to the work of our group and others, on the table with the government. But the government are saying through one reason or the other that it doesn't look as if it's going to be feasible. So that's very frustrating. That's very frustrating because people need help now. People need help now.
But if there are different circumstances in Donegal and certain counties, Donegal, Clare, Mayo, and more emerging counties, it's kind of indicative that the local politician should be on the ground doing the work, informing the department of what the local conditions are and why this might work in Dublin and may not work here. But let me get back. Sorry.
I think they are. Like, I think you can see by the questioning there in the joint committee that politicians, particularly in opposition, are trying. A number of them are trying to do that, but some others haven't.
Sean, was not so much the national politicians, but more like the local, the councillors would.
Well, I don't want to get into. I don't want to get into too much specifics on it, but the certain local TDs, have been helpful. Others, we've spoke to them all. Others less helpful, shall we say? But there is certain politicians that are trying hard, and you can probably see that by the line of questioning there at the joint committee. But there has to be a willingness. I mean, you can split hairs about the type of finance and the type of product and what the necessities for and all the rest of it, but there needs to be a willingness on behalf of the government to make this work. There has to be a willingness on their part. So that's where we're at the minute with it.
It seems that the banks, Mr. Hayes and Mr. Owens, were quite adamant that they need this NSAI review to come back as quickly as possible. And it's in their own personal interest to have this scheme work, right?
Yeah, it's in everybody's interest, Grant, to make it work.
No, I mean, particularly the banks would be kind of trying to do all that they can to make sure that the scheme does work. I mean, it's in their interest for it to work, right? But I mean, obviously it's in the homeowner's interest, but I mean, just that the banks and the engineers don't want to persist in this uncertainty. And I mean, even the insurance industry for that matter.
Well, I think the big thing is, for these remediated houses, when they go back on the market, I would imagine that's what the bank is most concerned with, because the bank is slightly protected for a house today because you've signed your mortgage 10, 15 years ago. You owe them that money, whether you have a house there or not, whether it's livable or not. So it is more about the market condition in the future, and how are the banks in these areas going to make money if there's no houses for sale that somebody will buy because we don't trust that they were remediated or not remediated correctly. I think that's probably a key factor in the future, why, you know, the banks are maybe more involved now than they have been in the past, because the future's at stake here.
Yeah, and that,
Sean, you were talking about mortgageability there. I wanted you.
Yeah, and that was my third point. Like, you know, the mortgageability issue, and yes, the banks have a vested interest in that because it's their assets, and until they're restored, our homes, more importantly, our homes are restored, and our homes should be restored to full mortgageability. People should have the right to switch mortgage lenders, top up the mortgage or get a further advance, or sell their home for market value and allow somebody to buy it. So they're the real key points of mortgageability, and that's what mortgageability is. And you know, the damage clause is very much related to that. So if you look at the covenant in your contract, we mentioned about to keep our homes in good and substantial repair, and also in it is not to jeopardize or allow your home to occur any damage or to depreciate. You know, so and it's written in quite layman's terms. So our homes don't fulfill those requirements, and you know, we should have our homes returned to mortgageability. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? We've done nothing wrong, and the banks have an interest in that. They want to see their assets restored, you would imagine, and we want to see our homes restored. So we should be treated fairly in that regard. And the fourth issue, Grant, of course, as well, is insurance. So those are the four real takeaways that I took from your snippets. Was the IAS 465, the urgency of that, the interim finance. We need to clarify that and get it over the line, and mortgageability, which we've touched on, and insurance. So you can't get a mortgage in this country without insurance. So we've had some senior members of the banks asking us, what's going on with insurance? Have you dealt with the insurance industry? And we've only really met them once, and there's more work to be done there. Sarah has had experience of that. You want to maybe touch on that a wee bit, Sarah, around the insurance aspect of it, direct experience of it?
It's really interesting listening to the snippets there, and there are other snippets out there from the same meetings, Grant, that I have listened to, and it's quite clear that Insurance Ireland are saying that, you know, deleterious materials are not covered as part of a normal peril for a policy. The defective materials are deleterious materials, so they are not covered in your home insurance. But they go on then to say that once the certification of remediation has been signed off, that acts as proof the house is repaired under the scheme. But for those houses that haven't had all of the deleterious materials removed, where does that leave those homes? And it's easy to come on and, you know, say these words, but I think it would be quite interesting to understand from an underwriter's perspective, what do those words actually mean? So you can have your house insured as standard risk when you get the cert remediation. However, on the other hand, deleterious materials are not covered. So what insurance are they going to give you? And I just think it would be really interesting to get somebody more qualified than myself to talk about these issues and to understand the statements that have been made in the Oireachtas and what they actually mean when a house has been repaired. Because one of the questions you'll all be familiar with when you go in to get your house insurance is your house of standard construction? What does a person with inside walls remaining say to that question?
Yeah, good point, Sarah. And of course, the certificate of remediation only stands over the work done at that time, and that's a crucial point here. It does not confirm that the whole house is structurally sound. It's only the work done at that time, and you know, I can't get my head around how the insurance companies are going to look at this. I think, to be honest with you, we have more scrutiny needed on the insurance industry. I think we need more meetings with them. I think we need to you know, there's some questions around some of the comments at the meeting that we need clarified. I think you would agree with that, Sarah, in relation to what you've said there. You know, so
Absolutely.
The idea that, so if you do an outer deep remediation, right, and you've got the internal walls still have pyrite as per the GSI report that the Mike Action Group got through the Freedom of Information request.
Yeah.
So if your outer deep is replaced, you still have walls that are going to decay over time inside. Even more concerning is if you have bison slabs. Your internal walls are holding up the bison slabs, these huge concrete slabs for your first floor. So it just seems almost naive in a sense to say you'll have insurance. If as long as there's a certificate, we'll give you insurance. But you know, if you've got any, we don't cover deleterious materials. I mean, it's like you know, it's kind of saying two opposites. It seems to me.
Yeah, that's why it would be really good to have further scrutiny from underwriters or somebody who's more, you know, able to talk about the subject. But the statements that I've heard through the Oireachtas don't clarify anything in relation to insurance, and I think that's my big takeaway.
Yeah,
They're just words.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think we need an industry position on that, and I know we'll probably be told that it's a commercial decision for each member, but there has to be clarity on that. Like I would have grave concerns around insurance in general, whether you know people are paying premiums for essentially no cover. We need that clarified. We need that clarified. People, you know, people have these concerns. We get emails all the time as a group. You know, so that needs to be clarified, and I think a lot of the work that we've done, Grant, as I'm sure you can appreciate, we're a group of volunteers. We have our own jobs and families to consider as well. We've concentrated largely on the banking aspect of it. We have looked at the insurance aspect of it as well, but you know, we're probably more work to do there, and I think more engagement with Insurance Ireland and getting some clarity. We did have a meeting with them, and their understanding of the situation was limited. So I think that we need to do more work there. You know, there's loads of different issues there that I think we need to sort of clarify. I know under new legislation as well that came in, I think in 2019, if I'm correct, that the onus is on the insurance company to ask the homeowner around any changes to their house, for example. You know, and I doubt, from my own personal experience and my own family experience, I certainly wasn't asked that question. So that's something that we did put to Insurance Ireland. So they should be asking people, you know, the situation around their house, because we don't want people paying premiums for nothing. It's bad enough the situation that we're in. So we need clarity around that. We need clarity around that, and that's, again, these are questions, Grant, that you know you're putting to us, and I understand.
No, I'm really raising hypotheticals to ask the.
But that, no, absolutely. But that would be a great question for Insurance Ireland. That would be.
I was talking to an insurance broker, and just to extrapolate from what you said there, my concern is that not only would the different insurers may act differently, but I would be worried that the insurers would be, I think it may even have been said at one of those meetings recently that every homeowner will be considered as an individual situation.
That's a standard response from most industries that they look at it on a one-off basis. But no, they can have clarity on that. You know, I think it's only right that people have clarity around the mortgageability of their home and the insurance of their home. So these are issues that are fundamental issues that need to be clarified, and we'll work on that as well. We'll do our very best, and we will re-engage with Insurance Ireland and ask those questions.
I think, Sean, it's fair to say that this shouldn't really be down to volunteers. Insurance Ireland and the banks should be forthcoming with all of their positions, given the scale of the issue. Despite the fact nobody wants to believe it might be 35,000 houses and more, they now know of the issue, and everyone has known of the issue since at least 2016 when it was reported on prime time. And nobody has come forward or stepped up and said, gosh, do I need to do something different here? And I think that, for me, is a really sad story about, the different bodies and departments that we've met with. It would be really nice to see people coming forward and documenting where they are and making things clear for homeowners. Clear and simple. Life is hard enough. The scheme is extremely difficult, and mortgages and insurance just make it all the more complex.
And that was something, sorry, Grant, that was something there, what Sarah's talking about there, that when we met with the central bank, that was something that they really emphasized, and they said, there needs to be a joint up approach. That was their words. There needs to be a joint up approach to this whole scheme, and clearly that didn't happen. Clearly there was no alignment with the banks, the insurance industry, and all the other stakeholders. For some years, if there was any contact, it certainly wasn't suitable or wasn't enough. And also another issue that I feel that is going to become more prevalent is from the legal perspective. So at the first meeting on the 11th of January, the homeowners, we asked that the Law Society should be present at the meeting. So I'm very interested to find out from a legal perspective. When I'm talking about the legal perspective, I'm talking about the conveyance of a property. So you fix up your property, it's partially remediated, and you go to sell it. I'm very interested to hear from the lawyer's perspective how that is suitable. Title, boundary, all the other issues that they have to do as part of their due diligence. Are they happy to stand over that? Will there be further caveats? How is their certificate going to be received in regards to that? So again, that's another, and unfortunately, we had to prompt that at the last meeting. The homeowners again had to prompt that should have been done. Getting back to what the central bank said, a coordinated, joined up approach. All this should have been done years ago. I mean, it's mind-boggling to think that we have a scheme from the Minister of Finance's own words, equating to 2.1 billion, and yet we don't have a joint up approach.
Well, I thought it was remarkable that the finance department said they didn't have the figures for what the costs were projected. Costs were going to be going through to 2030. Well,
not only did they not have the figures, but the figures, that were asked in your snippets there, you could see that there was a certain lack of alignment in terms of the figures. One stakeholder was looking at the other to try and answer. So, getting back to the central bank's acknowledgement of the situation, we need a joint up, a coordinated approach, and that clearly hasn't happened up until recently. And as Sarah said, a lot of the homeowners, and the other good groups there, you mentioned MAG, that have done sterling work with their freedom of information, fantastic bit of information to be able to use. Only for the homeowners, we probably would have none of this. It's crazy to think that these stakeholders haven't done their due diligence on it and had a coordinated effort. So
just going back, you mentioned, was it in 2019 that the insurance industry changed? Did it that instead? Say I was getting car insurance, right? the insurer would say, you've got to tell us absolutely everything. And if you miss out, you had an accident last year and you fixed it yourself and you didn't tell us about that, we may not cover you. But now it's the case with your car insurance that the insurer has to ask you the questions, you give the answers, the honest answers, and if they don't ask you about something, then they can't not insure you on the basis of that.
I don't know about car insurance. What I'm referencing is there was a legislative change. I think it was 2019 that stipulates that the onus is on the insurance company or the broker, I would imagine, to ask the question around specifics of your property rather than assume that your property is in the same state as it was the year before. So I'm really talking about on renewal and I think at onset as well. But that is a legislative change. I know for a fact when I phoned insurance companies, and I've been researching insurance companies and banks for some years now, knowing that what was ahead of me, but I know for a fact that I was never asked any of those questions. Right. Never asked any questions, and I know family members and friends that were never asked those questions. So that's a concern to me. That's a concern to us as a group. That and we did bring that up with Insurance Ireland. Again, it's it's a finer point in the grand scheme of things, but it's important.
Sarah, well, we're kind of winding down now. It's 9:15. Sarah, is there anything else you'd like to mention about the meeting? Was there anything remarkable, anything that stood out to you?
Other than answering and saying everything, Grant, like how are we in this position? Why are we all still talking about it? Why is the scheme not fit for purpose? Why has nobody applied to the scheme? Why have the banks not helped out? The list is endless. It's very, very, very frustrating. And I don't know when there'll be an end in sight, to be honest.
Mm. Yeah.
Sorry to finish on a negative, but that's how it is for me. Yeah.
But the banking group will still be plowing its furrow, I presume, as best you can. Like.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing our best. It's time consuming, like everything. We have regular lives, and you try and put this in as much as you can. And it was great getting the different bodies to the table like we've done, but it is very frustrating that it's over a year later and what we thought we had achieved is still sitting in a department in Leinster House somewhere with no decisions made on it. And everyone is now saying, well, let's not do anything till we get the new standard back or, the new standard written up. So it's always sit and wait rather than let's be proactive and active here. It is a humanitarian crisis. People are losing their homes. So more action quicker by all of the government bodies and all of the people who are tied to the scheme, whether they like it or not. Central Bank, BPFI, all of the banks and the Insurance Ireland would be great.
One has to honestly wonder, if proper pre-legislative scrutiny had been carried out, perhaps half these problems wouldn't be here today.
Perhaps.
Yeah. But we have to keep going, Grant. As a group, and as homeowners in particular, and we have to keep lobbying, keep working, keep asking the right questions there, and particularly for the vulnerable people in society. Our older members of the community are people that have, that know that they have no funds to complete. And, as I've said all along, the scheme isn't fit for purpose. We were sort of collectively brought around as a group because we've tried to work with what we have, because some people need to do things now. Some people can't wait for a year or 2 years for health reasons. You only have to look at some of the videos that we see on social media, people living with mold. I mean, it's absolutely it's disgusting in this day and age that we have our own citizens living in these conditions and not being looked after by the government, and we get excuse after it. It's time to get these key issues, those 4 key issues that certainly jumped out at me. 4 takeaways from your clients. We need to get those sorted, and we need to get them sorted soon. And I have grave concerns around the timescales around IAS 465, and I think there should be an interim update on it for people. People have a right to know how long it's going to take, and all government resources should be put heavily into that in order to do it. And any other legislative change that we need, they can put emergency legislation through for other things, but why can't they do it for us? Why are we not being treated fairly in this? You know, and I think we are, to coin a phrase, we're probably relatively optimistic that we can get things moved on, but we're very cautious. We're very cautious on it, but we have to keep fighting.
I don't know if I just, you know, with the People's Document meetings, I don't know if you had the opportunity to go to those.
Yeah, fantastic work. Yeah.
But the feeling of just the amount of people that came out, you know, it was very positive to see so many people coming out in Donegal, and I believe 500 people came out in Mayo.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was, you know, it gave me a lift, like, you know, and I hope that energy can be harnessed going forward, you know.
The emotion at that meeting in particular was very prevalent. You could see the emotion and the frustration and the anger at that meeting highlighted, you know, the utter discrepancies in the scheme. So, you know, strength in numbers, Grant. I know I'm a big believer in that. You know, the more people we have united on it, the stronger the case that we have. So yeah, that was certainly a very emotional meeting, and
I think it was very significant as well that in these recent meetings, Damien Owens is very clearly on record saying, you know, this scheme is not fit for purpose. On the basis of that, it seems like any insurance or anything else just kind of falls away, you know.
well, yeah, I think when you have the Director General of Engineers Ireland admitting that he would test his own foundations, I think that sums up the scheme.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I think that was a watershed moment, and you know, the BPFI explained the urgency of the review of IAS 465, and Insurance Ireland were the same as well. But these other issues, like these other fundamental issues, are still here, and they need addressed as well. You know, like there's a number of key issues that we need. We live in hope. We live in hope that they will be addressed. And, you know, ultimately what we need is an end-to-end scheme that fulfills all these requirements and all these specific points, all these focal points. Whether we get that or not is another matter. But in the meantime, we have what we have. And for some people that need to, you know, deal with their property now, then we have to make do with what we have. And it's not what we want. It's not why, you know, it's not what we should have, but that's where we're at the minute.
The only thing is that, you know, homeowners who simply can't get their hands on the extra money for, you know, even for the shortfall using pre-2008 reg materials, but you know, if they wanted to take the foundations out and they haven't got the money, and unfortunately, homeowners that do have really bad houses who can't come up with that money somehow.
That's why the interim finance, 0% interim finance is key for all those people, Grant. For all those people,
but you know, I thought I understood from Mr. Hayes that it wasn't really a loan that he was proposing. That it was more like, you know, a homeowner wouldn't have to go through a creditworthy check, for example. If under
That's
the
correct.
interim funding that he was proposing. So, well, I've lost my train of thought there.
So
But
basically,
the homeowners can't come up with the extra cash. They'll get left out. It'll be, unfortunately, only people, because the way the scheme works at the moment is if you can get your hands on the extra money, well, you might be able to get through and get your home done. But if you can't, then it might be a very depressing place to be in, to be honest.
yeah, and if they don't get it right in relation to the interim finance, the whole idea of the interim finance was, as the BPFI demonstrated at the meeting, was that there would be little credit checks, there would be little underwriting on it, it would be accessible to all. So something similar to some of the COVID type grants there in the UK, where you could log on to a relevant lender website with little or no questions around creditworthiness, affordability, all the issues that you would normally expect if you were looking for finance. And that was the idea around it, to facilitate for all. But and that's key, especially for people that maybe through no fault of their own maybe had some issues around arrears, and for people in their latter years that maybe wouldn't qualify in terms of the life of the mortgage or the term of the mortgage. All those people that we don't want to leave behind. So that the interim finance is key, and I would challenge anybody. I know, like, some of the comments at the meeting there around people being able to facilitate finishing their home from the grant amount. In the current building costs, expenditure and cost of building and labour and all the rest of it, I would challenge anybody, if you can do it within the remit of the scheme, then please come forward and let us know, because I don't know of anybody that can do that. So some of the comments made were that you could, they were calling it 100%, which was definitely a disingenuous comment to start with, but I don't know.
Important.
Yeah,
Important to add as well, Sean, that anyone who even reduces the size of their home can't.
It's penalised.
Yeah.
But Grant, you only have to go and get costings, and we've done a lot of research on this. Sarah gave a really detailed breakdown at the Oireachtas along with Donna on the costings and their endeavours to make it work, and like, it was unbelievable what they had to go through. And only they're very determined people, being able to manage it and essentially project manage their own homes. They were able to try and get that over the line. But again, I would challenge anybody that says that they can do it within the remit of the grant, that without being out of pocket. I think it's, with the costs, we're not seeing it. So that's why the interim finance is so crucial. That's why it's so crucial. And to have that revolving capital to allow people to start their home and indeed finish their home. Because if they don't get this right, and we've said this at the meeting, it'll be counterproductive. People maybe starting homes and they'll be unfinished, which is of no advantage to anyone. No advantage to anyone, the homeowner or the lender. So we need to get this right, and the lenders have a duty of care to their customers to make it work.
Just to say, that business about the professional fees that Derek Rafferty was talking about. Basically, at the meeting, the BPFI said that their proposal is still on the table, and Mr. Derek Rafferty and from the Housing Department and Ms. Aileen Gleeson from the Finance Department, they both laid out all these problems with this BPFI proposal. There was the fact that they were demanding a guarantee, and this was going to require legislation. they needed a special IT system. And I was thinking, yeah, well, just go do it then.
Well, if you have a 2.1 billion scheme, should an IT system be an obstacle for completing that scheme?
Absolutely, absolutely.
2.1 billion. So by the words of the Minister, Grant, the single biggest state-funded scheme in relation to housing in the world. If that's the only obstacle, we're not party to that information, by the way. We're not part of the specifics of what was requested. But if that takes an IT system to be set up for a 2.1 billion scheme, surely we can do this.
Absolutely.
Would you agree with that?
Sarah, what would you say in closing?
Yeah, so just to close out, I guess there's a long road ahead of everybody who is on the scheme or hoping to get on the scheme, and we really need the other players to come to the table with the joined up thinking and to take a step forward and do the right thing. And that goes for everybody from the Department of Housing to the Department of Finance to the BPFI. You know, where there is a will, things can be done, and it's clear that there is no will to help this cohort of people who are losing their homes, and that is not okay.
Right, and Sean, just before we close in, would you have any last words?
No, I think we've covered quite a lot, and you know, there's so much work to do ahead of us, and as I say, we'll remain relatively optimistic but cautious, and keep working as a group. And we thank our fellow homeowners and people in the other groups across Donegal and Clare, Mayo, Limerick, Sligo, etc. We thank them for their continuous effort, and hopefully we can all work together and try and get some resolution to these real fundamental issues that have been around for some time.
All right, well, thank you very much. So for people who tuned in, thanks a million for doing so. We're delighted that some people did tune in. I think I'm gonna try the next live stream in a month's time. This live stream will be edited and uploaded hopefully in the next few days or two to the Backstory channels. And then just Sarah, if you and Sean wouldn't mind just holding on for a moment just before we end the stream. Okay, and thank you very much, and thank you guys very much for being willing to participate.
Thank you, thank you, Grant. Thank you.
Okay, ending the stream now.